Next topic is comparing strings. So let's start with an example. I'll remove all of this code and try something like this. String answer equals yes. Alright, so maybe I got this response from the user, so this is what they answered. So I say if answer equals yes, let's just print something simple. Answers yes, and we can enclose it in single quotes. I prefer to use escaped version of single quotes. Okay, so just print this. Alright, so we have a string. It has this content. We try to use the friendly comparison operator for equality, and if this condition is true, we print this. So it's very, very simple. And here it is, it gets printed. So this worked. Okay, so we say that it seems like everything works, exclamation point, so we can move on with the rest of our program logic. To remember that when we were talking about string is an object, so this when the string is allocated, remember the object is allocated and it will contain the actual characters. Now also remember that we mentioned that whenever compiler sees the same strings, it may not try to allocate a new object, but just realize that because strings are constant, they never change. Why would it allocate brand new yes string for this? It'll just keep the same string. So we can force the compiler to allocate a new string for us. We can just enforce this, a new string. And if we do it this way, we tell the compiler, we don't want you to optimize this, we just want brand new string, guaranteed newly constructed object with this content. Okay, so let's try this. And look, nothing gets printed, so this doesn't work. Okay, so to explain what's happening here, let's go over this. So this doesn't work. Okay, so we just have to remove this comment and explain what's going on. All right, so this is an object reference named answer, and we know that we create brand new string like an object right here. This new operator creates brand new string, which I will draw as always like a 3D box with some content, and we know that this is the content. Now compiler also allocates string yes by default because we provided this string prototype, this literal string. So this is another object that gets allocated. It does contain the same text, both have the same characters in it, but here is an object that is not the same. And when we compare our answer to this, basically answer is pointing to this object. This is a reference to this object, where this is an object that has a different location. So equality between strings and equality comparison between object references compares locations of objects. So what we're doing here, we're comparing location of this object to the location of this object, and they're no longer the same. So once again, to rewind a little bit, in a case like this, where we simply said answer equals yes, in this case, compiler just realized that we want to reference string yes, and here, when we did this, this object was allocated right here originally, and then of course we use this reference, so of course answer is a reference to this object, we know this, but compiler this time, because both times the string was used twice, compiler realizes that this can be reused. So basically this yes returns a reference to the same object. In other words, it is never allocated twice. We have only one string. But when we use the second example, we tell explicitly the compiler we want brand new string, completely brand new object. And so this case, it doesn't work. Essentially, once again, it's the behavior of this operator, which looks great, it's just standard comparison operator for equality, but it should not be used with strings. So how do we fix it? We begin to use this method. So strings have a method, or a lot of methods built into the string class, and one of them is equals, and this is how you would tries to help me with the syntax, and I really don't need it. So here, this is how you compare strings. Basically, you take one string and compare it to another, but you have to use a method and pass this string as an argument to this method. And we call this equals method built into string is a logical string comparison, because it looks at the content and says, is the content of this string the same as this one, right? And of course, it finds out that this is the same. So by the way, keeping this version that we know that the two strings are different, run again, and here the answer is yes. So this equals worked. And also the second version of this is equals ignore case. So sometimes you may want to accept yes or whatever, and just compare them regardless of actual case. So this should work as well. If I run it, you see that the answer is yes. So just be aware of it. It's a very common mistake to just compare strings like I did originally with double equal sign, with the straightforward comparison operator. And by the way, this also is true for the rest of relational operators. So these things right here, they simply don't work on strings when you want to compare logical strings. Be aware of it, and this is a very common mistake to make, to attempt to use this. And what you will be doing, you will be comparing locations of the two objects in memory. Basically, this operator with strings will allow you to check if the object is the same. If it is the same, then it's true. If it's not, regardless what is the content of these objects, it's going to return a false, which is in most cases not what you want. The logical comparison is done with these two methods.